Indigenous land. Indigenous land. Indigenous land. Indigenous land. Indigenous land. Indigenous land. Indigenous land.
Hey, can I ask y'all, is the main goal here just to get rid of Columbus Day, or?
Yeah. It's your pride, man.
Yeah, no, for sure. I didn't know if y'all had any other goals or like immigration policy. I run a video blog, so I'm just kind of curious about what, besides being, is there anything else besides getting rid of Columbus Day, I guess?
Well, it's bringing awareness to the people around us, you know?
Right.
Because when we were walking through, I was sitting down, tying my moccasins.
Yeah.
And a white guy said, give up the fight. It's been 400 years, give up the fight. And I said, we're still fighting.
Right.
Are we?
We're not going to make it
We're not going to ever give up.
Center, but
Yeah.
I want to give you guys a brief history.
Another guy.
Does anybody have any idea about the history of the Hibbins Center and the the internment of indigenous ancestors? Since the archaeology and anthropology program has been here, they've studied what they call bodies and artifacts, which were stolen ancestors from the Navajo, the Ute, the Hopi, the Apache, the Comanche, the Pueblo people that lived in these areas. They called them artifacts, they called them objects of study. And so I just want to have a minute of silence to remember the ancestors that are interned there to this day, because about a decade ago the Navajo Nation filed a NAGPRA action against the University of New Mexico to get those their ancestors repatriated, and they only could get the ones that they could identify. And UNM resisted at every moment, and it took the Navajo Nation Cultural Resource Management to come in here and take those ancestors back by force. So let's just have a quick minute of silence to remember the ancestors that are interned, not just here, but in all places. UNM,
Indigenous land.
Albuquerque,
Indigenous land.
Mexico,
Indigenous land.
America,
Indigenous land. 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 Indigenous land.
was the Native American Cultural Center. The Beaver Club was founded. American Indians Against Exploitation met. And so today, I want you to ask yourself, where's the indigenous spaces on campus? How are indigenous people represented on campus? And I want to draw our attention real quick to the university seal. Has everybody seen this? You have a frontiersman, an Anglo-frontiersman, back to back with the Spanish conquistador. Does that represent indigenous people?
No.
Does it celebrate genocide?
Yes.
Does it celebrate conquest?
Yes.
Does it need to be destroyed?
Yes.
Burn a flag too.
So, I'm going to invite our brother Richard Moore up to talk. He was part of the Black Berets, is that right? Here in Albuquerque, and he's going to give a little bit of history and context with solidarity and alliance between indigenous people and Chicano movement.
You know, when we were walking and marching, it was bringing back a lot of memories to me, you know? Because I was thinking in 1968, for those of you that maybe weren't even born during that time, I think it's very, very important for us to not only be here today, and as our elders would tell us and constantly remind us, that in order to know where we're going, we need to understand where we came from. And I want to identify some very important, significant moments in that history. In 1968, on this campus of the University of New Mexico, and on 1968, on this campus of the University of New Mexico, there was a very, very important meeting that was held between students and also by community organizations and community activists, where a coalition was built between Chicanos and African Americans, Native Americans, and others on this campus. But we always said from the beginning that this campus, this university, belongs to those that work it and those that come here to this school. So what we say, and looking back at that history as a little bit, as sisters and brothers here, is that we formed a bond in 1968. We said as people of color and as other people that we wouldn't stand behind each other, or would we stand in front of each other. We would stand side by side with each other as we continue to take on the issues that were very important to us. So that coalition between student groups and so on began to put in place a series of activities here on the campus of UNM. Now I'm going to go through that history very, very quickly. One, to remind us that in 1970, as we came through Yale Park, in 1969 and 1970, Yale Park, as our brother had mentioned, was a gathering place for us. But at the same time, that was a space and a place where our sisters and brothers, our homeless people, also gathered at Yale Park. We took care of each other. We cried together. We told stories together. We shared together. We built our strength and unity together. And many of the marches and protests that took place during that time began at Yale Park. Many of you remember when the National Guard was called into the campus of the University of New Mexico based on our history. When we were coming by the Student Union building, I remember the meeting as we were locked ourselves in that room inside the Student Union building, and said when we came out to the National Guard that was here, our sisters and brothers, we need to always keep that in mind, that many times they use our own people against us. And we said to our sisters and brothers as the National Guard was called in, sisters and brothers, this strike that is taking place on the campus of UNM is not about you, but it is about you. It's about your families, it's about your children, it's about our generations, it's those that will come after us and those that are with us now. So join us on this strike on the campus of the University of New Mexico. I need to tell you that because that's one very historical moment that took place here, where physical plant workers, where workers on this campus came together with the students. The students came together with faculty and so on, and this university was completely closed down. That's why the National Guard was called in, because this campus was completely closed down. But I also must share with you, it wasn't not about us not receiving our education or whatever, because even during that time, we would go into classrooms, we would go into rooms inside the Student Union building, and we would hear stories from our elders, from sisters and brothers, from communities, talking about land grants and water rights and health care and child care and all those issues that meant much to us, not only as community folk, but as students. because we're students and we're community and students. So I say, moving through that history very, very quickly, that in 1971, then you may remember in 70 and 71, when many of the organizations were founded in the late 60s and the early 70s, and the pacts and those commitments and those bonds that were developed together and so on with each other. In 1972, and I'm going through history very, very quickly, the Black Beret organization, many of us that come out of the Chicano movement, that are rooted in Chicano community, that our blood, many of us, our blood that flows through indigenous blood that flows in our veins today. So there could never be really any separation before us, because we're one people and we stand as one people here today, side by side with each other. That's very important for us to understand. And in 1971, when these issues began to happen and consolidate here, in 1972, members of our organization, many of us came out of the Boundary organization on this campus when we founded UMAS, the United Mexican American Students. And when UMAS and African American Studies, the Black Student Union, the Kiva Club, and others came together, Larry and Bob and our sisters and brothers are people that are just as important to you, that are just as important to us as we protest and stand here today. In 1972, on January 29th, 2 of our members were assassinated by the Albuquerque Police Department because we stood side by side, not behind or in front. We spoke for ourselves as we speak for ourselves today. And based upon that, they assassinated 2 members of our organization. We need to remember that history, because it was connected to Larry, it was connected to Bob, it was connected to our indigenous sisters and brothers, African Americans, and the others that stood together wherever we were and wherever we came from. We marched together in 72. Do we think it was by accident that Larry was assassinated or shot and killed in 1973? We stood and marched from Yale Park down this street in 1972 protesting the Albuquerque Police Department. Those same assassinations and the same stories that you're hearing that's taking place by that institution today. In 72 we marched. We stood side by side. Now I want to tell you this, going through this very, very quickly, that in 1973, when Larry and Bob and that whole situation happened, then we came together as unified as we are today. We stood side by side protesting and marching, not only in Gallup, but on this campus. The president of this campus, the governor of New Mexico, and so on, the appointment of that individual in Gallup, New Mexico, to the Board of Regents on this campus. They were not able to divide us at that time, and they should not be able to divide us today. We stood in unity with each other. In 1973, Larry was assassinated. Based upon that, our members were assassinated, as I remind you, in 1972. We stood again side by side with each other and continued to march and protest in support of each other. I say, as we can continue to go through that history today, that whether it's Chicano studies or whether it's Native American studies or Africana studies or women's studies or whatever studies it may be, don't let this university divide us from each other. They're doing it. This is one of the most racist institutions in the state of New Mexico. It's a hoarding ground of institutionalized racism, and we need to break those chains, not only the oppression, but we need to break those chains of racism that is developing and growing inside this institution. Sisters and brothers, we need to do more of what we're doing today, not less of what we're doing today. We need to stand in solidarity with each other. So in closing, I say, and I gave you a short version, but I tell you, in 1974, when our sisters and brothers, and I say our sisters and brothers that were killed in Gallup, New Mexico, there was a very important meeting that took place in Montezuma, New Mexico. For those that can think about it and remember it, the castle, as it's called, in Montezuma, where the leadership of the Chicano community and the leadership of Chicano organizations and Native and Indigenous organizations, including the American Indian Movement and other groups, came together in the castle, occupied territory, because we took over the castle in Montezuma, New Mexico, and we took it back and put it back in the hands of the people that should have been involved and turned into in the first place. And we formed a pack and we marched. We marched together in Gallup, New Mexico. And let's never forget that, sisters and brothers. That's a very, very important part, because they were constantly trying to wedge differences and disagreements, as still, as I say, doing today, not only in this campus, but our governor and other institutions in this state. So I say to you, sisters and brothers in Anglin, let's never forget where we came from. I gave you a short history. There's photos that show that in 500 years of Chicano history and photos. We put that book out in 1976, just to remind you. Huh? So let's continue this dialogue, this relationship. Let's not let this president or any other president separate and divide us from each other. And I call upon you truly as sisters and brothers, never forget those sisters and brothers that have been killed by the Albuquerque Police Department recently. There's a lot of gain that's taking place here on this campus. I was trying to remember what some of it is and what some of it was. But we got a long ways to go, sisters and brothers. You're to be commended. Thank you very much for inviting us, Los Sardinas Institute, to be with you today. So again, sisters and brothers, let's hang strong. Let's hang strong. Let's hang strong. Let's win. Let's win. Let's win. Let's protest, march, occupy, do whatever is necessary to bring justice, not only on this campus, this city, this state, this country, and the world. Thank you very much, and all power to the people.
We're gonna hang the banner first, and then we're gonna put some eviction notices. If some people want to put some eviction notices on Dane Smith Hall, others we can put them on the president's house over here. We're gonna hang the banner on the president's lawn. So after we're done, yeah, the president of New Mexico, University of New Mexico is right there. But when we're done with that, let's come back here, and if there's anybody else that wants to say anything, we can meet up here. So, who wants to hang the banners? Who's got tape? Where's the tape? Okay, Becca's got tape, so get some tape from Becca for the eviction notices. I've also got more eviction notices. There's string on this banner that we can use to hang on the fence to tie it on. So come and get the eviction notices. Are we going to the bureau? Yeah, we can.
Yeah, but I also I really appreciate you guys' input and perspective.
Yeah,
that's why I reached out.
and I think that I think it's going to go forward. Like, in all honesty, I think Alex, from my knowledge, supports it.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And I think the faculty support it. So, and I think if we start with that, it'll open sort of doors for doing other sorts of.
Yeah, I mean, the ideal situation is to have a situation where we can get the funding, and then the graduate students and the faculty can work together to flesh out the initiative. The thing is, in order to get the funding, it has to be specific enough, to get broad enough to convince these funders that this is going to happen. Even if we don't know exactly where it's going to lead us. So we'll see how it goes.
Well,
but thanks again for this event, man. It was great to see you.
We'll see you around, Andrew, and just email me about what you guys come up with.
Yeah, we'll
Hey there.
keep you in touch.
Hi, my name's Chris.
Hi.
I run a blog, and I'm just kind of want to clarify, is this just an anti-Columbus Day event, or is there, I know there's demands of funding for a campus group, or I'm a bit confused as what the end goal.
Well, the end goal is this is part of Indigenous Resistance Week, so this is celebration of Indigenous resistance at the University of New Mexico, not just the history, but the ongoing sort of Indigenous resistance, and talking, because we're proposing 2 resolutions through GPSA and ASUNM to abolish Columbus Day, but then also get it changed to Indigenous Resistance Day and Dia de la Raza, but it's also about talking about how Indigenous people are represented on this campus, and how the history of colonization, genocide, and conquest often gets erased and elided or celebrated in the sense of the seal. So it's not about one specific message, but it's about all these various groups that are coming together, whether it's Mecha, whether it's Kiva Club, whether it's RSF, ASGSA, RSGSA. We're all coming at, because colonization and Columbus Day affects everyone, right? And so Indigenous Peoples Resistance Week is not just about Indigenous peoples, it's how all these other organizations are affected by these histories and sort of these symbols. So that's what we're talking about. This is one event of many throughout the week. Hey, see you, Sam. So this is one event out of many.
Okay.
So this is just like a march. It was just kind of like a solidarity march to sort of get people out here and talking and to get some of our messages across about abolishing Columbus Day. There is a petition online that people can go check out. It's on change.org. So.
And do y'all actually propose occupying the president's house at one point?
No.
No.
I don't think that's been a strategy that I've heard of. So.
Okay, because on the eviction notices it says if...
It's a symbolic eviction.
Oh, okay. Very well. I just wanted to clarify. All right, well,
What's
thank you.
your blog?
I'm sorry?
What's your blog?
Mine European, or Irish. Irish English. My blood?
No, your
Oh, my blog. I thought you meant my blood. Oh, it's called campusreform.org.
Okay.
And I just blog about campus events and mostly political too. So
Okay. So that's one of the things is we're not actually I mean, that's not the strategy of this particular movement or like the Indigenous Resistance Week as a whole, but
Right.
I don't know what other student organizations are planning.
Sure. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you too. Okay.